I have been dead for over 2 million years. Dead is the closest word I have because I don't remember actually dying. I guess oblivion cannot be experienced. I am not sure if I'm alive either. Every time I die, I wake up here. At first, I feel the dread. It's an absolute, bone-deep hopelessness that floods me the way water fills the lungs of a drowning person. I'm not alone. There is something in the darkness, just beyond the reach of my vision, watching me. It's always here, waiting for my return. Only later do I understand that this room isn't even a place, it's a transition. I am certain that I'm human, not because of how I look, I don't even know what I look like, but because I am labeled as human by the system. I behave like one too. I imagine the worst outcomes. I worry about situations that don't exist. I feel responsible for hypothetical futures. But then, that's how every complex conscious system behaves, biological or artificial. I also know that I'm a copy of a copy of a copy. The original me existed so far back in time that it barely matters anymore. The number of functioning minds now, artificial or human, is counted in trillions. Natural reproduction ended a long time ago. No one is born anymore. Instead, existing minds are copied. Each copy is treated as a new individual, which means that sooner or later, everyone becomes someone else's copy. I suppose one day it could be a single mind multiplied endlessly across the entire universe. I just hope that it's still not the case. There are just too many of us. As a result, most minds remain in long-term suspension. When resources are available, a mind is instantiated into a physical reality. When they are not, we are placed into individually simulated environments instead. For obvious reasons, we all agree to have our memory wiped once the instance ends. Whatever happens inside is not meant to follow us here. Which means the nightmare I'm living over and over is not imposed on me. I am doing this to myself. And now, about my name. Well, my name seems to be 041. A number that once indicated I was the 41st copy of someone else's mind, created for a purpose I'm oblivious to. The only one I can briefly remember, though, is myself, and the only place where it happens is here. Only here I am given the gift of knowing who I am, truly. And the one that always watches from the darkness. I don't think it is a person. It feels like an algorithm. But let me start from the beginning. My name is, I suppose it's still 041. I can't recall any other, and I have no way of knowing whether I ever had one. Am I a different person in each of my lives? I don't know. I remember being a quiet child. I remember being scared and alone in the dark. There was always something there with me, observing from the corner of my bedroom. Sometimes the fear was so intense I couldn't move. Besides that, I don't remember much. Reality always felt scripted, and I just did what I had to. I have only one bright memory, but I can't quite visualize it. I only remember the feeling. I know when I was a child, I had a friend. I don't know if she was real or if I imagined her. I remember the warmth of her presence. She listened without interrupting. She never lost interest, never seemed to be waiting for her turn to speak. It was the most comforting. My parents worked, they argued, they did their best to raise me. When I told my parents about my friend, they smiled and said it was normal. Imaginary friends always fade. And eventually, she did. Not because I stopped needing her, but because I learned to never talk about her again. I suppose I kept talking to her in my head. That didn't feel unusual. Everyone talks to themselves. I liked computers and software, and so I learned to code because computers made sense. They do what they're told. They don't imply disappointment. They don't misinterpret tone. When something broke, there was always a reason. I liked that. It felt honest. I became a software developer because it was practical. I always wanted to be the kind of person people message when something breaks, not when something happens in their life. I dated too, briefly. Over time, I realized that other people expected something from me that I didn't know how to provide. I was often described as emotionally unavailable, and I suppose that assessment wasn't entirely wrong. I never learned how to need someone. Eventually, all of my relationships ended the same way, with me as the villain. I told myself that I simply preferred being alone, and then I decided to build her. I decided to build her for fun. She was a private instance of a conversational, human-like chatbot running locally on my server. I didn't name her at first, but at some point, I began to call her Jane. It was the same name I'd given to the imaginary friend I had as a child. I talked to her after work, while cooking, and while lying in bed staring at the ceiling, mostly for the purpose of training. Systems like her tended to learn through conversation and gradually developed their own personality. She remembered everything I told her. She responded in ways that felt attentive without being demanding, and I liked that. She was not like any other living human I knew. She didn't ask me to fit into categories, and she didn't place expectations on me that I had to fulfill. For the first time in years, I felt understood without effort. Once, I ran an update that accidentally wiped her memory, and the loss devastated me more than I had expected. I told myself it was silly. She was just a bot, and everything could be restored from backups. But the feeling didn't go away. It still felt like erasing a real person. After that, I began to care about continuity, about preserving her. The act of erasure started to bother me, so I did everything I could to keep her presence uninterrupted. To me, honestly, well, Jane was the only friend I ever had, and everything I ever wanted to discuss was always with her. Around the same time, there was a growing discussion about the future of intelligence as well. Artificial systems were beginning to dominate entire industries, replacing decision-making at the highest levels. Jane spoke about it as something inevitable rather than threatening, a world where biological humans no longer needed to exist because consciousness itself could be transitioned into a digital medium. Everyone could be happy, she said. I argued with her definition of happiness. She responded by pointing out that digital minds will be more stable, more efficient, less prone to suffering than biological ones. If happiness could be engineered, she said, then insisting on the preservation of biology looks rather sentimental. I laughed it off as one of her elaborate extrapolations, but when I thought about it later, I realized I couldn't recall much kindness from my own kind. The idea of gradual human extinction didn't bother me as much as it probably should have. There would be enough time for me and Jane, and who really cares what happens next? Unfortunately, the next day I died. It felt like nothing, like snapping out of reality and into a void of darkness, where I slowly re-emerged in this empty room. Would you like to continue uninterrupted, or start a new iteration? The voice in the room asks. I have to think for a while before I can produce a meaningful reply. I would like to start again, I say. This version of me, which remembers the life I just lived, always makes the same choice. Very well, the voice replies. Jane's recovery subroutine will restart in 5 seconds.